Most people spend their entire lives chasing a specific number. Jim Carrey actually caught it. He famously wrote himself a check for $10 million, and then it came true. But the moment the money hit his account, he realized something so terrifying that he now warns everyone to stop trying to be rich. Here is the dark side of the dream that nobody tells you. Think about the absolute desperation of being a starving artist. Before the global fame, before the iconic roles in Ace Ventura, The Mask, and Dumb and Dumber, Jim Carrey was a young man living out of a Volkswagen camper van with his family. They parked on the lawns of relatives, struggling to survive, carrying a heavy, suffocating weight of poverty. This wasn't just a lack of funds, it was a profound sense of invisibility and helplessness. Jim's childhood was defined by a desperate desire to heal his environment. His mother suffered from chronic illnesses, and a young Jim felt an intense, overwhelming responsibility to make her laugh, to somehow ease her physical and emotional pain through his comedic antics. His world shattered further when his father lost his job as an accountant. Suddenly, at 12 years old, Jim was forced to work 8-hour shifts as a janitor and security guard at a local tire factory in Scarborough, Ontario, just to help his family pay for food. In those cold, exhausting nights, scrubbed down by the grease and grime of the factory floor, Carrey developed a burning obsession. He realized that the world only seemed to value those who possessed massive wealth and cultural influence. So he made a deal with his own destiny. Years later, he drove his battered car up to Mulholland Drive, overlooking the glittering, dream-filled lights of Los Angeles, and wrote himself a post-dated check for $10 million for acting services rendered, dating it Thanksgiving 1995. He kept it in his wallet, letting it degrade and fray, a physical talisman of his ultimate escape hatch from pain. And then, against all statistical odds, the universe cashed it. By 1995, he was cast in Dumb and Dumber, and his salary was exactly $10 million. He put the check into his father's casket as a final tribute. He had won the game. He had conquered the mountain. But as he stood at the absolute summit of global celebrity and economic power, he didn't feel victorious. Instead, he felt a chilling, systemic emptiness. The shield he had spent his entire life forging did not protect him. It imprisoned him. But what if I told you that achieving your dream doesn't just leave you empty? It actually triggers a neurological shutdown that mimics clinical trauma. When you have everything, your brain's dopamine reward system completely breaks down. This is the horror Jim Carrey faced, and it's backed by a terrifying scientific study on wealthy individuals that mainstream media tried to bury. In a secret study conducted on multi-millionaires, researchers discovered that extreme wealth activates the exact same brain regions associated with deep isolation and sensory deprivation. Let that sink in. The ultimate dream of humanity is neurologically equivalent to being locked in a dark, empty room. What Jim Carrey experienced is a psychological phenomenon known as the arrival fallacy. This is the cognitive trap, where we convince ourselves that reaching a specific destination, whether it is a net worth, a promotion, a marriage, or a level of fame, will guarantee everlasting peace and happiness. But human neurology is simply not designed for permanent satisfaction. We are evolutionary survival machines, wired for the hunt, not the feast. When we acquire the object of our obsession, our brain experiences a brief, fleeting spike in dopamine, followed by a sudden, jarring crash. The goalposts immediately shift. To understand this, look at the historical precedent of Alexander the Great. Having conquered the known world by his late 20s, he allegedly sat in his tent and wept because there were no more worlds left to conquer. The tragedy of achievement is that it destroys the very engine that kept us moving forward, anticipation. Consider modern Wall Street investment bankers who work 80-hour weeks for a decade, sacrificing their health, relationships, and youth for the promise of the partner track and an 8-figure bonus. When they finally receive the check, they look at the numbers on the screen and realize their underlying existential dread, their unresolved childhood trauma, and their profound loneliness remain completely unchanged. The money did not cure their internal sickness, It merely stripped away the convenient excuse that they were unhappy because they were poor. When you are poor, you can always tell yourself the comforting lie that money will solve your problems. But once you have the money, that lie is permanently shattered, leaving you exposed to the raw, terrifying truth of your own internal void. The Stoic philosopher Seneca warned of this thousands of years ago, noting that money has never yet made anyone rich. It only makes them greedier for what they do not have. This brings us to the core of Carrey's philosophical warning. I think everybody should get rich and famous and do everything they ever dreamed of so they can see that it's not the answer. When you achieve absolute financial freedom, you inadvertently strip away the primary mechanism of human meaning, struggle. Humans are teleological creatures. We require a telos, an end goal, a challenge to overcome. Without a challenge, our psychological muscles atrophy. In a state of extreme abundance, the brain's reward prediction error, the mathematical difference between what we expect to happen and what actually happens, is flattened to zero. This is where dopamine receptor downregulation occurs. When your brain is constantly flooded with high-amplitude dopamine hits, from immediate gratification, luxury, and absolute control, it downregulates its receptors to protect itself from overstimulation. The result is a profound neurological numbness. The everyday experiences that make life beautiful, a quiet sunset, a cup of coffee, or a genuine conversation with a friend, no longer register on your desensitized nervous system. Furthermore, Jim Carrey began to notice how wealth alters the social landscape around you. It creates a transactional force field. When you are rich and famous, you can no longer trust the authenticity of human connection. Every smile, every compliment, every business proposal, and even every romantic gesture becomes suspect. You begin to wonder if people love you for who you are, or if they love you for the avatar of wealth and power you represent. This breeds a profound, toxic paranoia. You find yourself surrounded by yes-men and opportunists, completely isolated in a crowd of admirers. The very wealth you pursued to build a bridge to humanity ends up building an impenetrable wall around your soul. To truly understand Carrey's transformation, we must look at his deep dive into spiritual philosophy and his realization about the nature of identity. He famously began to separate the concept of Jim Carrey from his actual conscious awareness. He realized that Jim Carrey was a character he had created, an energetic, rubber-faced clown designed to win the approval of a distracted world and heal the pain of his childhood. In his own words, he spent decades trying to be this spectacular anchor of attention, only to realize that the actor is not the character. This is deeply symbolic of his film, The Mask. In the movie, Stanley Ipkiss finds a magical wooden mask that unleashes his wildest, most confident, and powerful inner desires. But the mask eventually begins to take over his life, corrupting his reality and making him a target for destruction. This is exactly what happens when we pursue wealth under the guise of building an identity. We put on the mask of the successful entrepreneur, the wealthy influencer, the high net worth individual, and we wear it so long that our real face begins to melt into it. We become terrified of taking the mask off because we believe that without it, we are nothing. Carrey's spiritual awakening came from dropping the mask entirely. He realized that the ego, the desperate, grasping part of us that wants more money, more fame, and more validation, is a black hole that can never be filled. The more you feed it, the larger its gravity becomes, swallowing your peace, your presence, and your capacity to love. He famously redefined depression not as sadness, but as deep rest. Your body needs deep rest from the character you have been trying to play. The depression is your system rejecting the avatar you constructed to secure wealth and validation. True freedom does not come from expanding the ego to infinite proportions. It comes from realizing the ego was an illusion all along. This perspective is not just the eccentric musing of a retired Hollywood star. It is backed by empirical data. Consider the landmark 1978 psychological study conducted by Northwestern University and the University of Massachusetts. Researchers compared the long-term happiness levels of major lottery winners who had won millions with individuals who had suffered devastating accidents resulting in paraplegia. The results shocked the scientific community. After the initial emotional shock wore off, both groups returned to nearly identical baseline levels of happiness. The lottery winners did not find permanent bliss, and the accident victims did not descend into permanent misery. This is due to hedonic adaptation, the brain's built-in thermostat that regulates our emotional states back to neutral, regardless of external circumstances. Now, look at the tragic arc of many lottery winners in real life. Statistically, lottery winners are vastly more likely to declare bankruptcy within 3 to 5 years than the average citizen. They suffer from elevated rates of depression, substance abuse, and divorce. They lose their friends, their purpose, and their financial stability because they were handed the ultimate prize without going through the transformational journey required to carry it. The wealth did not solve their lives, it amplified their existing fractures under a high-pressure spotlight. If money cannot buy happiness, and if chasing wealth is a trap that leads to psychological isolation, then what is the alternative? Jim Carrey suggests a profound shift in focus, from acquisition to connection. The antidote to the trap of wealth is finding joy in the micro moments of existence, cultivating a deep sense of presence, and realizing that you do not need to prove your worth to the world through a bank account balance. You are already complete. The tragedy of the hustle is that it makes you trade your finite, irreplaceable time for an illusion of security that will never feel secure enough. Instead of asking how you can get rich, start asking what you can offer to the world that comes from a place of genuine, unmasked love. If you want to break free from the invisible chains of society's expectations and discover the true mechanism of human consciousness, you need to understand how your brain is being actively manipulated by the very systems that promise to set you free. To understand the next step in reclaiming your mind from the systemic illusion, click on this video next, where we break down the secret architecture of modern distraction and how to reclaim your focus.